Hello, my name is Jessica Putman, and I am the student coordinator for the Roxboro Roundtables. I would like to welcome everyone to the tables. Today our topic is the next economy, U.S. and China, and our host today will be Professor Thomas Fung.
Hi, this is Tom Fung. I'm with the Global Fashion Enterprise Program.
Hi, I'm Louise Sandstrom. I'm a second-year industrial design student.
Hi, my name is Abigail Tash. I'm a graduate student with the Global Fashion Enterprise Program.
Hi, I'm John Deutsch. I am involved in technology and marketing.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Muley. I'm a sophomore industrial design student with a minor in sustainability.
Hi, I'm Charlene Soames. I'm a founder and brand strategist with Brand Storia.
Greeting, this is Jerry New, Law and Society student freshman.
Hi, I'm Madeline Wilcox. I'm professor of East Asian Studies at Philadelphia.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Rolfing. I'm a student in the Strategic Design MBA program and also an Energy Efficiency Program Manager at Philadelphia Gas Works.
Hi, I'm Kayla Jagish, a third-year textile design student.
Hi, Donna Scott. I'm a professor of Design Essentials and Integrated Design Process.
Matt Knetch, senior marketing student.
Well, thank you so very much. And first and foremost, I want to thank Professor Evan Lane for the opportunity to host this roundtable, and thanks to our special guests and friends and students and other faculty members. What I'd like to do over the next 45 minutes is not so much to get ourselves tangled up in numbers. We know there are big numbers out there between the U.S. and China. But I think from a philosophical construct perspective, that what we'll do is like to pop this thing open and have all of you guys to kind of come back with your own diverse views and maybe forecast on what the next century is going to be. Before we get started, I just want to frame something out here. Is that, in 1902, a gentleman by the name of Cecil John Rhodes founded the Rhodes Scholarship Program in Oxford. A century later, a guy by the name of Stephen Schwarzman, who happens to be the co-founder and the chairman of the Blackstone Group. Now, all of you folks have seen the Blackstone Launchpad. Of course, it's to generate a platform for entrepreneurs to start businesses and so on. But more importantly, Stephen Schwarzman founded the Schwarzman Scholars, and that college is residing in Tsinghua University in Beijing. And his perspective is the global powers of the next century is going to be somewhere between China and the U.S. And he also argues that, to be truly a global leader, we need to perhaps understand both the United States and China today. So having said that, what I'd like to do is open this up to the floor as to who would like to get this conversation going.
All right, well, I'm Madeline, and right now, China has a new president, and this is also a time that there's a lot of economic changes and new forecasts, and there's just the National People's Conference. Also at the same time, there's a question of sustainability coming up through this documentary that was online. It's offline in China, but it's available in the U.S. Under the Dome by Tai Jing, who's a former CCT reporter. And I know a lot of students around the table work on sustainability, and this seems to be a major issue in China right now. This is an issue that perhaps a quarter of China's internet users watched this documentary. What do you see? I mean, some of you have been to China. What do you see as kind of issues of sustainability in China and ways that the U.S. and China can kind of work together in developing more sustainable models for business, for infrastructure, for working together?
I'd like to offer my opinion on this. Shoney Law and Society, I'm actually a Chinese citizen myself. The reporter you refer to, Tai Jing, I suppose you're talking about most recent documentary Under the Dome about China air pollution. Take off my nationalism away from this. However, I like to point out there are many loopholes and mistakes I found from that documentary. Indeed, China is experiencing some very hushy time with sustainability. Just like back in the days when British had their Industrial Revolution, then we all know why London, for a long while, was called City of the Fog. It's because air pollution. Same as China. we're having our advancements, and we're going with new program and new structure for factories and international cooperation. I believe that's normal for a state. China is currently working on this problem. Government is putting major effort into solving air pollution, especially in Beijing, the capital. During the past 5 years, all the steel industry and heavy industry company or the factory around Beijing area has been either shut down or relocated in other provinces. So I'm really looking forward to the Chinese market instead of it's going to put an end to it soon or it's a sudden thrive. So as a matter of fact, I don't really believe that's a long-term issue.
It's sustainability. For those of you who are working on sustainability, do you see opportunities there?
I can touch on that.
Yeah.
My name's Abigail. I am actually at the end of my degree, and I'm currently working on my capstone, and it has a lot to do with sustainability, especially in the fashion industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I just got back from China with Professor Fung, so I got to visit factories, and I was able to see the sustainability initiatives actually working on a factory level. So I would like to kind of touch on how I believe that as a country, the consumers over in China are not too keen on the eco products, looking for different fabrics that have a recyclable concept as how they are produced. But in regards to a factory level and manufacturing, because these manufacturers in China are partnering with United States brands, like American brands, they actually have been introducing these initiatives more and more into how they produce the goods in order to maintain these communications, build the trust, and to keep them as customers. So I feel like from a factory level, definitely these initiatives are becoming more and more popular as we are their customer. But I feel like since that's at the core, it needs to grow and expand and pair with these other initiatives on a country level. So I see change happening, but it's slow and it's progressive.
My name is Brittany Buckmeyer, and I just wanted to add to your point that as need drives innovation, and I think as we have to address the issue of sustainability when it becomes no longer a choice, we're going to have to adapt. And I think that's kind of what you're saying is that American brands and the American consumer might have a consciousness of this that maybe the Chinese consumer doesn't yet have, but the innovations that we're driving are going to be integrated into products that they're consuming in a way that you don't have a choice. It's not, oh, do I want this shirt that's made from recycled water bottles? It's, oh, that's the shirt that I want. And I think that's also coming from a fashion perspective, it's our job to make those products desirable. The value isn't just that they're sustainable, the value is that they're sustainable and they're sexy, and that's our job, is to make that, bridge those two worlds.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the Chinese customer will definitely, as they see our American brands progressing in and making these retail locations within their country and seeing these projects, these different garments, these different products firsthand, I think they're going to start adapting. And they're going to start realizing, okay, if this is what's going on here and now, how can we take this and manipulate it for our country, and where can it go?
This is Charlene. I want to ask you both an additional question about that, or just sort of give you my experience. I come from the sporting goods industry, and years ago, probably now it's been a little over 15 years, I used to go to manufacturing plants in China. And I found, fashion was driven actually by them and not us. You go to a town where, the hospital has a dirt floor, but the people are wearing platform shoes and, bell bottoms, and you go, what is going on here? There's that dynamic, and the dynamic of culturally a different outlook on life was what I experienced. And I'll try to elaborate a little bit on that, but for example, we actually struggled, I won't say what company, right? And this was a while ago, but we struggled with getting people in the factories to wear masks when they were creating a product that involved paint, or putting gloves on when they were applying resin to a product. because no matter how much we impressed upon them the health hazard and tried to force it, you turn your back and they've taken it off. They don't care. And there's some, I don't know if that's a cultural thing, an education thing. I'm just curious from your experience more recently, how you see any change in that, or how?
Yeah, I definitely think with corporate social responsibility initiatives such as like maybe improving safety conditions, there's always some ethnocentrism that's involved. Like, oh, we know better than you. Like you should really do this because we're Americans and we said you should really do this. You know, I definitely think that comes into play. Also, having traveled to Asia, I do see a lot of fashion driven from them and us. Maybe repackaging it or putting a spin on it, but really taking it from them and calling it our own. So I definitely, to your point earlier, like I definitely see that as well. But I think as we are becoming more global, and as change and innovation is not only coming from America, like innovative companies are starting to happen elsewhere, I definitely think that it will be more of a collaborative thing than a top-down kind of thing.
Hi, this is John. I have a question for everybody, I guess. You look at China and where they are in their economic and societal development versus the United States. Sustainability has become a buzzword and a focus only in recent memory. I can only imagine, the United States in maybe the mid-1900s being compelled by outsiders to get your act together quickly, when all it was about trying to make money, trying to get product out, figure out how to ship it worldwide, the basics. We're still trying to handle the basics. No one was knocking on our door at the time saying, guys, shape up or ship out. So I think China has an interesting kind of challenging dilemma, right? The culture and the society isn't there yet. They haven't gone through the steps we've gone through. I remember in the 80s, Los Angeles was under a huge smog like Beijing is today. We didn't all of a sudden say, oh my goodness, we need sustainability. We said, oh, bummer, look at that cloud. We can't see the mountains anymore. California did its act up, but slowly. It wasn't a crisis like we look at crisis today with Beijing. Yes.
This is not only what I find really compelling about one argument for this is that the great thing is that we can learn from what's come before, and it can be adapted. For instance, in the Taking documentary, there's London and the measures to combat the Great Smog of the 50s. It wasn't this is something we have to go through, but it's like we really need to look at what we can do as a society in terms of responsibilities, different companies and as government to work together to figure out how to do this. And the great thing is you can draw from all around the world and all these different things, and own research and development in China to work together to figure out how that can be. And it's something that actually is very personal to a lot of my friends who live in Beijing and who live around where this is it's an immediate concern. It's not just the future, but it's really maintaining also you don't want a brain drain in China. There's a lot of you want to be able to sustain a creative community and a community of thinkers and developers in a city and a place. And I think that's what's really pushing this for a solution. And I think it's exciting to have kind of all these people from different cultural contexts coming together and working on it.
London, Los Angeles, and now Beijing. 3 different cities in 3 different countries. We all have our first time. I wouldn't even call this a crisis. It's a necessary step in the advancements of a country from its old time to its new modern era. But the problem is why suddenly people are paying attention to this crisis. I would say it's because of time. Back in the time when Los Angeles had the same problem, when London had the same problem, people didn't pay a lot of attention on that. Because I don't think back in the days people understand what global warming is. People don't understand what international environmental cooperation stands for. So I would say it's a necessary step. However, just because it's under a different time, that we have different views of it. However, the distinct nature is very same. And when it comes to environmental protection and also sustainability, who's liable for that? Whose responsibility that is? Is that the US big brands who sign a contract with the Chinese factory, or the Chinese factory itself, or do we rely on each other's government? Of course, we often think that governments are very inefficient. As a matter of fact, let's do this more.
If I just say, because you made it, Evan Lane, I just think you made a really good point.
You could say China is polluting and it's doing all these things, but it's in cooperation with U.S. companies. What we do, our U.S. companies here, to avoid the regulations that we have here to keep a clean environment, we ship it over there, we circumvent child labor laws, we circumvent all kinds of labor laws, environmental laws, to make a bigger profit. So I like when people point the finger at China and saying they're not following the rules, but we are, or at least our corporations, are hand in hand exploiting that situation and very much behind it. And the problem I have with what you're saying, I don't see any benefit to U.S. corporations to encourage China to clean up, because they're making a tremendous profit by avoiding all these safety devices that we have here. So that's why I don't feel as optimistic.
Well, yeah,
as
I think it's maybe, this is Madeline again, I don't know if it's necessarily optimism, but seeing it as kind of, there's potential, and there's a lot of challenges, for sure, and if you know, so.
Indeed. Challenges are...
let's give the floor to Louise first.
Sure,
yes,
absolutely.
this is Louise. So I totally agree that you can't just point the finger to China, because it's like the global society of consumers that have created this of sorts, because we are the ones that buy fast fashion right away when the style doesn't fit anymore. We're the ones that want the really cheap products, and to get really cheap products, you want to outsource to a place where it's cheap to produce. China's offered that, and surrounding nations as well, where they don't have the same regulations about a lot of things, but it's slowly coming along. And the leaders of China, as well as in cooperation with like the U.S. government and leaders in Europe, are trying to hinder it. And I think part of that, what they are trying to do is that they're trying to get their corporations to understand that it's like partly the footprint that they leave in China is actually American, because they are the ones producing that. They're just outsourcing it so it doesn't affect them at home. So I definitely think it's a problem, but it's a global one that is hard to discuss, and it's definitely gained more attention than they would have in like the 80s and 50s. And I think a lot of that is thanks to social media.
This is Tom from here. This is great. I want to just jump in and say that I believe that asking the right question sometimes is half the answer. So what I wanted to kind of tap into is like, we're talking about change, and on one side we're talking about a revolutionary change. We're gonna need it right away. On the other side, people talk about more of an evolutionary change, because you know what, we are creatures of habits, and sometimes it takes time for us to change our behaviors. What I like to do is to kind of branch into another set of conversations. Like, you ever heard about the notion of circular economy now? We're kind of living in a sharing economy or circular economy. Like some of the things, of course, is like repurposing, recycle, reuse, and Patagonia. There's a lot of companies out there now trying to sort of to be better. You know, it's not going to happen overnight. And then, of course, the sharing economy, in my mind, is like, you know, Uber is changing the way that the taxi industry is doing. Airbnb is changing the way the hotel is being managed. So in my mind, is that there's a movement going on now is to increase happiness by sharing assets that we do have. And maybe it's another way to look at more of an evolutionary change to get to be a better environment.
However, when it comes to shared assets, who take the bigger portion? That's a major problem. The U.S. and Chinese trade, especially on clothing, I'm sure many of people sitting here are experts on this subject. Usually, the U.S. takes more benefits and more interest from it. Pair of jeans, Levi's, let's say, manufactured in China, made in China, shipped all the way to U.S., then sell, let's say, $40 for a pair of jeans. However, in China, after the exchange rate, even before the tax, they're selling a double price from it. So, how I'd like to look at it, they manufacture it in China, they ship it over, take every single penny of interest from it, at least take most of it. Then when they sell the very same thing in China, they add more processing to it, make it more expensive. I consider that's kind of like a hazard, a morality hazard, how they do it. U.S. company, they well, we see back in the days, like 20 years ago, there were more U.S. companies manufacturing their products in China. However, over the years, they're shifting from China to other countries like Vietnam, Philippines. Why is that? Because, like Professor Ling mentioned, different challenges. China is solving them. Now we're raising our minimum wage, and government is step in for people who work at those used to call sweatshop to earn more money for them and their families. And the U.S. company said, well, it's going to cost more to manufacture them in China, so why don't we just ship to another country? Which I see this is, of course, a company should look at their interests, should pay attention on how much money they make, and reduce how much money they have to, how much the stuff going to cost. However, it seems like they're abandoning China very irresponsibly. And also now, and again, history always repeating itself. When stuff happens, when problem happens, every single U.S. corporation tells everybody that it's not our fault. We give the advice to Chinese factories. They refuse to follow. So they create a crisis over environment, over human resources. Blame the wrong party for it and refuse to take responsibility. I don't know how you guys look at this, but it seems to me like a moral hazard. Should we share, or should U.S. take more?
Well, Tiffany Rolfing, unfortunately, business is business. It's going to, whoever's going to want the biggest margins and profit is going to take that.
Absolutely.
With that said, there's a movement of, with the sharing economy, there's transparency as well. And I think that's the direction, and that's what is going to help change the culture. Companies like Everlane, where they put on their website how their product from the raw goods gets transported right to your doorstep. And people like that. They might not fully understand, but it's not only a marketing technique, it's a way for that company to be socially responsible and transparent. And that's something that's a way to share as well.
Yes.
Going back to your point, that's a way for all parties to be involved.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. This is Charlene. If you just take Uber as the example, and there are a lot of businesses like this in China. I think one of the things that's fascinating to me is we have this infrastructure. If we just look at technology, it's just the easy, simple example. You go to places where people who may not have a high income are walking around with the latest cell phone, and it's a different dynamic there. And technology, they don't have the infrastructure that we do. And I think there are some. In business, there's a similarity. There's not necessarily, or I should say there's more of an opportunity to avoid this bureaucracy of the way business has always been done.
Absolutely. I think the bottom line business to stay still alive is to make profit. Otherwise, even as non-profit organizations, they need a bare minimum to sustain themselves. So you can't blame them to wanting to have that desire because that's their sole goal to make money. But I think with the shared economy and today's world, the consumer power is little underestimated because we are not as together as a unit or a united body to express our powers and the rights we have, because it's us, the consumers, that drives any other companies to make their decisions and to push where the trend and the industry is going. Like Walmart, for a good example. I don't believe their way of doing business is 100% ethical, but every single one of us probably shopped there once upon a time. And as Uber, it's a great example because I think there is a need. Taxi industry, all the taxi companies is not doing what the consumer wants. That's why Uber is so successful these days, because it's addressing the problems people want to be addressed, and that's why it's a great example, I think.
Kind of to build off what you just said, I think as consumers and designers, we really need to think about what
what it is that we want and how we can change the way that people view products and the way we buy things. Like you were saying, right now, the majority of people would want to buy the cheapest version of anything that is out there. Like, I know when I go grocery shopping, I look for the brand that's the cheapest, and that's what I buy. That's probably the one that's made in China, not the one that's made in the United States. But right now, that's how I feel, just because of, like, that's just how we have been kind of conditioned to think. But I believe that if over time, and we see it happening already, that if we slowly, or rapidly, however fast you want to do it, change the consumer mindset to be more value-driven as opposed to, like, cost-driven, then I think we'll see a change in the way that things are manufactured, because we won't be as concerned about buying the cheapest product.
This is Kayla Jagish. I want to go back onto Professor Fung's comment about Patagonia. And if you go on their website, you have the footprint chronicles of where your fabric's coming from, the mills, the number of men and women working, the wages, and how fair everyone's being paid. And I think that's definitely a reason why people are going to companies like that. And to build off of that, like, people are turning to recycling water bottles as thermals, and they have this new thing going on where they're taking a bus around the country and they're repairing old sweaters that have been ripped. And I think that's the new way of doing it. It's not just vintage shopping and thrift shopping, but like taking what you have and like repairing it and going forward in that direction. I think being responsible is definitely the big word.
Yeah, this all sounds like their response to what I would call an enlightened consumer base, right? In the States and probably in Western Europe. And that's the question about China. And I have a question to the team, right? Is how is that happening in the Chinese marketplace? Because if the enlightened consumer demands an enlightened policies, then companies will chase more than profits, will chase better practices as well.
So this is Madeline again. One thing I was noticing as kind of thinking about this podcast was if you look at online purchases in China, there's apparel, which I think is similar to the United States. The second largest is prepared foods. Mm-hmm. Now, why is that happening in China? It's because there's the concern with food safety, with organic foods as well. There is a market. It's small, but if you go to Beijing or China, you do see a market for some green products. There's rules about plastic bags, and you have to pay for a plastic bag when you're in a store. So you're bringing your own bag. So there is this development of a consumer base. I think we'll see more of that in the generations to come. And now what can be done with that is a large question, and what that will demand of the industry. And it's also not just the United States as kind of the designers and China as the producers. There's designers in China, there's producers in China, and it's also international as well. So culturally, there's a lot of influence coming from other sections of Asia, Korea, Japan, Europe. So it's really linked together.
This is Abby. I just kind of wanted to touch on when you were explaining about the Levi jeans and how we would pay $40 and it would be double over in China. I actually feel like now that I've gotten the chance to visit and do market research all the way from counterfeit markets up to like the bigger brands and even American brands that are present, I feel like we're on completely opposite sides of the spectrum. I feel like us as Americans want cheap or we want eco. There's two sides to it, and that the luxury isn't as important as it was before.
Yeah.
And then when you go to China, I feel like now as the economy is growing and wages are going up and this income, and they have discretionary income where they can put it into other areas, they're willing to purchase the stuff that they weren't necessarily able to purchase a few years ago. And I mean, just an example would be an Abercrombie here is seen as a logo business to sell cheap, not cheap, but to sell t-shirts. Over there, they're willing to pay 3 times the amount, and they view it as a luxury brand. And to us, it's the complete opposite. So that whole dynamic is so interesting.
Yeah, this is Madeline. I just wanted to say that a lot of the luxury shopping oftentimes goes to the United States. And second-tier and third-tier cities where you'll see luxury brands more kind of being bought in China. But the commerce and retail itself, too, is there's a lot of traveling
This is Louise again. I felt like when I visited China, I saw the brand popularity with the masses. The consumer basis and people with disposable income is growing rapidly in China, and they're actually realizing the worth in design. However, they don't necessarily know more than the brands, so they're willing to spend more money on a brand name that they know rather than the new eco product. So I mean, if you market it and make it well known to the masses, I'm sure it could sell, because they already spend thousands of dollars on designer handbags and shoes and clothing that they know for a fact has good quality. Why wouldn't they spend the same amount on something if they knew what was behind it?
This is Abby again. I actually got the opportunity to speak with, I guess you would say people my age, younger 20s. And I asked them, where did you purchase your clothes and where do you shop? And I thought they were going to say some of the markets that I visited or some of the American brands that I saw as I was visiting. And one of the things that they touched on is online shopping is huge. So these brands that are within their country that we may not know anything about, they don't have the capital to have locations, so they put everything online. And these girls told me that they would rather go online and find something a little bit cheaper, that's trendier, and they do the majority of their shopping online. You can even see, I believe it was last year with Singles Day, Alibaba shot up with 9 million sales. So you can see that their online shopping is growing just as ours is growing.
This is Tom Fung. I want to piggyback on Abigail and John's comment on that. If we were to look at that, America is now becoming a post-industrial country and embracing gradually to an enlightened consumerism, then I would argue strongly that the whole cheap China is over. That China is going into a post-manufacturing era, into embracing American consumerism big time. What are the implications to all of us?
This is Madeline again. One caveat about embracing consumerism. So the idea of the Chinese dream, as put forward by Xi Jinping, and also it originally, I think it's tied to Tom Friedman. It's moderate prosperity. So the question is this American consumerism, but it's not tied to big, there's a bit of a kind of contradiction in that. The need for a consumer base to grow the economy, but it can't be lavish overspending. There's actually, golf is not, there's golf courses are not being developed. It's not supposed to be something that people in the government, should be, it's starting to be seen as kind of wasteful. So I think finding this middle class consumer in an era where they're supposed to be spending but not too much lavish spending, what does that mean?
Well, I have a question. This is John. So I'd like to model these things. So can we model the current Chinese environment against something in the U.S.'s past to kind of do predictive analysis? So when you mentioned, not lavish spending, right? Mm-hmm. But still, maybe a very narrow robber baron class, which is true. It sounds like the early 20th century or 19th century here. Is that a fair comparison? And if it is, can we start looking at comparing these two maybe different tracks, but predicting the future growth and then thinking policy around where it's going?
Or this is Charlene, and just to add to that, it was always my observation, I don't know if this is correct or not, it's purely my perspective, that what is happening in China first happened in Taiwan. Taiwan had a manufacturing base, and as their standard of living increased, the manufacturing went offshore off their shore to China. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if there's a way to draw conclusions there.
I think the hard thing with Taiwan is you think Taiwan, just the diversity of mainland China, and to think about size-wise, it's a lot larger, linguistically diverse, culturally diverse. But I think pointing to kind of this Gilded Age is an interesting way to think about it, as well as this kind of reaction against the Gilded Age. I mean, in the United States, you had the rise of unions, you had regulatory bodies in the government, and you see some of that kind of going on. You have the anti-corruption campaigns. You have these rules about what officials can order at a, what you should order at a dinner, only a certain number of dishes. So you're starting to see this reaction, both kind of politically and also socially among everyday people against kind of lavish spending. But it's still happening. There's still. I was just watching this video about the yacht industry in China is exploding. Mm-hmm. So how do we make sense of that, and what
Yeah, to John's point about where in American history is China now, and I understand, I guess, what you were trying to do. You're trying to draw comparisons. You're trying to understand in something that's tangible to you. But I also think that that's part of the problem. Like, this podcast is called The Next Economy. Americans and us, we need to get out of our own. There are bigger things than us, and there are bigger things to come than what we have been through for China. And I think that, to Tom's point about this disruption of Everlane and Uber and Airbnb, there are bigger things that China is capable of, and I think that's also the scary thing. And I think that threatens a lot of Americans, but I think what Madeline is saying is interesting. Culturally, they're different from us, and that it's going to manifest. Their success is going to manifest differently than ours has, and that's okay.
Yes, you cannot just simply compare China and U.S. in a history value or perspective. After all, even though yes, China, PRC, People's Republic of China, we are not found even for 100 years. However, when you look at the Chinese culture and the government system and all that stuff, when you come to official level, you have to look all 5,000 years of the Chinese history. That's a very long time compared to the United States. So when that comes, the thing is we cannot just use plan A, plan B that you guys use in the States, the exact same thing to Beijing, to any other place in China. And talk about China-Taiwan is a very interesting perspective. As I know, that there's a movie many years ago called China Blue, if anybody ever watched that. It's a basic documentary following a sweatshop in Guangdong province in China, which is actually where most sweatshops, or now there are factories, they're transformed from bleeding people to the bone to an actual legit business. Most of them are located in Guangdong. Now China government used to not care anything about those business because they want to make money. The government want or own business to make money and also bring more potential with the international market. However, now the Chinese government is stepping every single thing, especially those what they will see and I will see as somehow unfair treatment when it comes to international cooperation. And the reason that most factories move from China, Taiwan to the mainland is because that we all know that citizens of China, Taiwan usually went to protest for big corporation like Nike. What they did was their plant in Taiwan, and somehow they are not willingly to shift their business out of Taiwan to mainland. They are kind of forced out from China, Taiwan. That's as a matter of fact.
If I can just say one thing, I want to make sure I wasn't misunderstood. I wasn't trying to compare U.S. to China. I believe in patterns, and broader patterns, not just U.S. China. Every human being are human beings, right? We have patterns. We are societal creatures, and there will be huge differences between cultures and how we express ourselves. But can we look at patterns and learn from them and guide our future and make some predictive analysis without being stuck, to your point, in the paralysis of historic analogy alone? Mm-hmm. So I apologize if I put that too short.
Hi, this is Jessica. I just wanted to state what you were just saying and then what Brittany stated. You, for Americans and other people from different countries and cultures, to compare, it's just basically to get a better understanding of what that country is and what the people is. Because normally, if you just go off of what there is, you probably don't understand their culture. But if you can compare it and relate it back to your own culture and the things that happen within your country and your history, you can get a better understanding of the people and what they're going through. And then you still can compare America in like their industrial period and the things that happened, the laws and the policies, to China, only based on simple fact that they don't have child labor laws. They don't have eco laws or anything of that nature. So like their policies can be taken from us if like they're not perfect in America, obviously, but like just different things that you learn through American history, like another culture can look at that and say like, how can we improve upon that and make it better? So I do get what you were saying about comparing it, because it's easier to relate back to and understand back and forth. Just saying.
Max.
This is Max. I absolutely agree with John. Yeah, of course, we need to look at past and future. There's a saying back in the days in China. It's called like this. 以古为镜，可以知兴替. What it means is when you use history as a mirror, you can see past and future. And of course, you gotta look at the history and what has happened, not within your own self, but in other parts of the world, different countries, to see what's have come to what we are today. And see what we can adjust from that, and taking the mistakes from the past of everybody, and to not go through the same thing again. We're different in very different ways, and that is okay. That's why that's a beautiful thing, because we're different. And seeing some other part of the world went through similar things, and what they did to make it better, and what can we adapt. Not the whole thing completely, but picking through different things that what they did works, and make a trial run of that what may work back in China as United States was going through, and eventually we can become something that will work within a different culture, but eventually going to a similar, a better solution. That's why we look past. Oh yeah.
This is Matt. I mean, just to say, like, where was the U.S., I don't know, 80, 90 years ago? We're in the same position. We had children working in all of the factories. There was no one cared. There was no unions or anything. After World War II, Europe didn't have any factories left, and that's why we were able to grow so fast. And then we had so much money that we're able to move into this position where we can just think, and that's our jobs. We get to sit around and think. We don't have to have factories anymore, so we moved them all overseas. Now this is China's chance to grow from that, take all the money that they can get from us, and hopefully move forward. But they have 4 times as many people as us. I just don't see how their economy would work without factories in it, at least serving part of the people.
Thank you. The super huge population will definitely make the progress slower compared to the United States. However, what I'm trying to say here, I hope you would not misunderstand me that I'm a very progressive patriot. I am a patriot, but I am not, by no means I'm not here to say anything against any country. However, I do believe China and the United States in future has endless potential for our cooperation to grow together. However, that must be built on a foundation of mutual respect, which now seems to be a lack of it. That's the major issue that China and US, regardless of the individual, business, or the government, must work together.
I wanted to say it's great hearing these discussions of kind of finding ways to build cross-cultural empathy and cross-cultural understanding, and it's kind of this idea of mutual respect. And it's talked about in terms of the government level, but I think it really begins with the people, and I think it begins with conversations like this. I think it begins with these travels going, and we're more connected than we were. That leads to a lot of problems as well as solutions. But I think that's a really. I think of other questions. Tom, did you have something else to say?
No. I think this is a very good point that Madeline, that you and I had this conversation about the whole cultural context of it, And I think that having us here from a diverse background, and I've always believed in that when we ask the right questions, at least it's half the answer. I don't think that this conversation is gonna end. I hope that we'll continue on, whether it's through podcasts or coffee at Ted's or maybe on the road with some of us. You know, we're going back to China again, 2016. I know that our time is close to it, and I just want to open this to the floor again. Any comments you'd like to share? And please do.
I have a question, a contentious question.
Oh, we need more time.
There's a narrative out there that American business, American culture is innovative, and China's is not. That's a narrative. Now I see shaking heads. I knew they'd be shaking heads, which is good. But there's a narrative out there. Now the question is, why is there a narrative? And if it's not true, how do you change the narrative? Because the empathy you just mentioned before, both of you, doesn't work if we don't understand who we're talking about and who the people who we're trying to work with are like. And if we look down upon them from an innovation perspective, how far can we go with our relationship?
I have a comment on Donna Scott. I have a comment on something that you had said much earlier, which I think you hit the nail on the head when you had said you were talking about LA, and you said people weren't interested in the smog until they just sort of said, "Wow, look at that cloud! Now we can't see the mountains anymore." And that was sort of a really important statement, in that in order to change the mentality of the consumer, you need to make that consumer understand